Hello, I'm ABX Toycat, and welcome back to another podcast. This is episode 2 of the Toycat Show, an audio-only show I do on the second channel where I talk about gaming news, technology news, and a little bit of business/YouTube news. And I'm doing a second episode because a lot of people seem to like the first one. And I figure, that you gotta try a second one to see if people like it, because it's a novelty idea, like, oh, a Toycat podcast, I'll listen, but maybe won't listen to a second one. Or, maybe we'll see if the second one has some traction, and we can keep doing it, because you can't really add a new effect, a novelty factor to each new podcast. I can't make this podcast the let's talk about fashion advice edition. We can't make the one off that. Let's talk about my favorite art collections. It has to kind of stick to the same theme each week. I think that's the idea of a podcast, and that's why it's the gaming news / Toycat Show podcast. So again, all that branding, monetization stuff, all going to come later. Just going to talk and do stuff for now because I like talking at this microphone, and today I have some fun stories to talk about. I have a story to do with Minecraft story mode, and not reviewing quite as well as anyone really involved with it might have hoped. We have a story to do with the Steam Link releasing, and people actually getting their hands on it, and we can talk about that whole thing because there's a fun little side anecdote that comes of that, and it's also an interesting move from Steam to aggressively market PC gaming to some extent, or it's one of their moves to do that, and I think it's kind of interesting to talk about, the whole PC console thing. And then third of all, I'm going to be talking about hashtag Chipgate. If you follow tech news, you've probably heard about this one, but basically iPhone have been having a big issue of their chips, and I thought I'd talk about that because the reality is it's a very different situation than you might just get from the hashtag Chipgate. But I'm going to be talking about the nuanced situation that is that in the end here. But first of all, before I talk about any of these stories, I wanted to add a new section, which I couldn't really do in the first week because it's going to be follow-ons. So this is where I follow on from the previous week's comments, because, YouTube comments, there's a lot of badness in there and a lot of stuff you probably shouldn't be reading, but there's also, decent comments that flow to the top. There's useful feedback and whatnot, and I figured I respond to that sort of stuff, and that's what this is for. So like I said, I couldn't do this in the first week because I'd be responding to week zero's comments, and I could just make those up, but it's more fun to have real comments. So there's kind of two prevailing trends that I noticed a lot of people said. First of all, people were like, Toycat, you said IBX Toycat instead of 2Cat in your intro. So on this second channel, I always say, hello, I'm IBX 2Cat, but basically for the podcast, because I want this to be a bigger thing, I'm going to say Toycat because this might be going to other places eventually. I'd like this to eventually, way down the line, be on iTunes or whatever. It might be on a podcasting platform. And for all those different places, 2Cat doesn't make too much sense because my name is Toycat, or my internet name. My real life name isn't Toycat, yeah. Although that'd be an awesome thing to change it to, right? But yeah, the other one that I kind of got the sense of is people saying, yeah, listening and gaming is what I do at the same time. I think it's a really awesome way. And if you're listening and gaming right now, I hope you enjoy that game you're playing. It looks pretty swell from here, through your monitor speakers, even though they don't have any way of me seeing, but you can pretend I can see, and that's all that really counts. Enjoy your game. But yeah, let's get straight into the first story, which is actually about Minecraft story mode. So this is a story I haven't seen anywhere else really pick up on, but I think it's really interesting to talk about because, of course, the whole Minecraft thing is something that's really interesting to me, and usually I'll cover big Minecraft news on the first channel, but this is kind of a weird story because Minecraft story mode has been doing very, very averagely in reviews. So basically this is the big, the first big deal between Microsoft and someone else to the Minecraft IP, and I think this hasn't done as well as either of them would have hoped because it's currently scoring just below 70. It's at 69 as I do this, but obviously more reviews are going to pour in, and a lot of those reviews are in the 50 and 60 range where people aren't too fond of the game. And not only that, the user score is actually sitting at 3.8 right now, 3.6 even sometimes. Basically it's a game that a lot of people don't like for a lot of reasons, but compared to Minecraft, where you might figure some of those same arguments apply, it's sitting at 93, and the console editions are sitting at anywhere from 87 to 90. So yeah, basically the game is kind of failing critically when it comes to reception. So exactly why is that, and exactly what does that mean? So I think the reason for that is because Telltale are known for making these gritty games that tell really great stories, and Minecraft story mode is telling an interesting enough story. But even as someone who should really love this game, I love Minecraft, and I think I loved all the Minecraft references, and I like playing games like that. I still thought the game was just pretty good. I'm not really that excited for the sequel. I didn't think the story mattered that much. There wasn't really any good humor in there. I think I might have laughed the once, but the reality behind the game is it just isn't very good. And I think one of the second big problems is, I might be reversing what I said last week, is because this game uses the Minecraft IP and they want it to be YouTube friendly, basically every single, Minecraft is a community almost built around YouTube. I'd say YouTube was like 90% of the success of Minecraft. Even if you disagree, you can't argue with the fact that Minecraft and YouTube go very, very closely together. A lot of the people still playing Minecraft and still excited about Minecraft are excited about it because of YouTube, or at least watch YouTube. And because the fact that they're allowed to upload YouTube videos of this game, which again, I'll talk about in a second, but basically every single YouTuber has uploaded some copy of this, that plays Minecraft. It means that if you watch any Minecraft videos, you don't have to pay for this game. This game is very, very expensive. It's £17 or $20 for like a 2-hour experience. I think that's all the episodes. So, like a 10-hour experience, but that compared to Minecraft is a terrible value. Minecraft is the same price, but you get thousands of hours of fun. It's kind of hard to justify a game that isn't really even playable. It's kind of like a movie you watch when you can watch the game for free on YouTube. So I think the reality behind this game is it was kind of all right for YouTubers because, they get to, have this brand new thing, their thing, but I don't think it's going to do that well sales-wise. I think it might do kind of averagely for Telltale, but I think Telltale are going to be in a really tricky place here because they've annoyed a lot of their fans. The reason this game has a 3.6 average user review is because loads of people, bought this game expecting a Telltale game, and usually if it says Telltale on the box, it should be Telltale in the box. But the reality is, it's a very childlike game. There's because they need to appeal to Minecraft audience, which is anywhere from like I think it goes as young as like 4 or 5 these days. You need to make sure you don't have anything offensive in there, and I think that meant they kind of had limited room to make a deep and also kind of funny story, which is a shame. But they made a game that is kind of upsetting their own fans. Doesn't even do well with Minecraft fans. Like I said, it's currently scoring at 69, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this works out for both Microsoft and for Telltale. Telltale for doing this brand new weird game, and Microsoft for this is the first time they sold out the Minecraft IP, and it looks like they're not even going to make that much money from it. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But right now, I'm just kind of intrigued by the Minecraft story mode thing. Will the future episodes just be kind of rushed out, or will they be like, okay, let's address this feedback, let's make episode 2 as good as it can be? I guess we can only find out when episode 2 comes out, which seems pretty logical. So yeah, let's move on to the next story while we wait for episode 2 to come out. We might be here for a while if we do that, because the second story here is about the Steam Link. So the Steam Link is one of Valve's hardware products, which they announced quite some time ago. If you recall, they had this big announcement all at once for Steam VR, virtual reality by Steam, for a Steam controller, for Steam machines, and for the Steam Link. And Steam machines were this biggest hype thing ever. They were hyped for so many years. They were going to run this custom version of Steam OS and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is they ended up just being, custom-built PCs in a small form factor that ran Linux. And it's like, oh, okay, then I guess that's a thing. But the way they're doing it now is a little bit better with the Steam Link, because the Steam Link, to me, marks a real marketing strategy from PC gaming. Because right now, the big advantage PC gaming has over console, I mean, in terms of actually selling more things. Because really, if you do your informed research, it comes down to what your budget is as to what you should buy. If you want to spend, like $300, let's just say $400, and you want to have a console, have a machine that can play games for the next 5-6 years, then a console is the best choice for you. If you want to spend $800, then maybe buy a console with all the accessories, but the reality is you can get more horsepower out of a PC. That's going to be true now, but it's going to get more and more true the longer the generation goes on, because in let's say in 3 years, $400, still the best bet might be a PC at that point, because a used PS4 will run you like $200, and you can probably get more performance from there. And although that makes them a better budget option, it means they're going to cut out more and more of the market, because one of the things about gamers is we're known for having disposable income. And although I think the consoles are a little bit expensive this time, they do come down in price as it goes along. And because the PC gaming option is always going to be there, and it's always going to be biting into their market share, it's a problem enough as it is. Last generation, I think it took away enough, but this generation, with Steam marketing it, I think it might go some really interesting places, because the thing about Steam is Steam directly benefit from PC gaming. That when you get a PC, gaming PC, you probably install, Steam to buy games. So the more, PCs that are sold, the more, Steam, games that get sold, and that's good for them. And I think now that there's someone to really market PCs, because the reason I think consoles have been dominant for so long is because marketing. Like, think about 5 years ago. Did you see any ads for go buy a PC? You probably didn't, but you probably saw ads for the Wii, the 360, or a PS3 game or something, and that's kind of the big difference there. So yeah, now that Steam is getting behind, actually marketing the PC as a platform, using this device, it's going to be quite interesting. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned what the device is yet, I might have glossed over it, but the Steam Link, which came out, it was coming out soon, it's currently available for pre-order, is basically a device which will allow you to play your PC anywhere in the house. And this is what I mean by it's an active invasion into console territory, because if you have a Steam Link, you'll actually be able to, the Steam Link will allow you to use your PC horsepower anywhere. Because the reality is you can take your PC down to the living room and use it to play PC games, but a lot of people don't want to do that. Even if you're the most hardcore, PC fan, you probably don't want to do that. You might just buy a console instead, but this is meant to be an alternative to that. Instead of buying a $400 console, you buy a $100 Steam Link, and then you can connect them up. And one thing I think is quite interesting is even though it costs, I think it's $100, it still is only 1080p 60 FPS, which for most people on any console platform, and even most PC gamers, that's fine. But a lot of PC gamers are all about, 1440p and 4K. So, that's going to be interesting to see exactly how that does develop. But either way, Steam have released this kind of interesting thing, and it is active invasion into console territory. And you might, the question I kind of raised to myself after this is, how can consoles turn back from this? The current generation is doing terribly. I think, the PS4 is the exception. It's doing well, not PS2 well, but it's doing pretty well. But, the Xbox One, the Wii U are both selling pretty terribly. How can they come back from this? What can they do either this gen or next gen to really kind of revive the generation or revive consoles? And I think I've come to the only conclusion which is logical, and that is to do more stuff that is, actually takes advantage of the fact that they manufacture the stuff. So right now, let's be honest, the PS4 and the Xbox One are both gaming PCs. They're gaming PCs in a small form factor they're nice if you want to play games, but because they were released at an awkward time, they don't necessarily run all games at 1080p 60 FPS. So even if you just want, let's just get the games run at a decent frame rate and a decent looking thing, you can't necessarily get that out of a console. So the gaming PCs released a little bit too early, whereas the PC is a gaming PC released whenever you want it to be, because you can make whatever parts you want in there. So yeah, it's I think that's why the current generation is kind of suffering as a whole, and I think the way they fix that is to have cool things that are only on the console and that the PC doesn't have. It used to just be game support was one of the biggest things the console had, and that would sell it alone. But a lot of games want to go to the PC now. So instead of making games your only selling point, make them part of your selling point. But making games play better on yours is a really good thing. So think about the Wii U. Even though the Wii U is horrifically powered compared to any PC you can build, you can spend so little and have a PC at the same power as a Wii U. The reason people have Wii U's and the reason they're fun to play on is because they have a tablet screen that can hook up to those games and is using it's used in a lot of games really effectively to do some cool stuff. It makes for a better gaming experience that you just cannot get elsewhere, and it means that if you want to if they'd worked a bit of third-party titles, because they kind of lost that, they could have had Batman Arkham Knight be better on the Wii U. They could have made it so the touchscreen will help you with your detective clues, or I haven't honestly played those games, so but they had third-party titles and they just kind of lost it all, and it's kind of a shame. But I think what consoles need to do at this point is they need to realize they can't be the relevant thing for 8 years just by being hardware, because even if it was the equivalent of $1,000 gaming PC released today for $400 and somehow they kept that going for 7 years, even by the end of 7 years, it's going to be eclipsed massively by PCs. They need to go for something that's not just graphics and not just games. They need to take a step to something else now. And I think that something else is to go for something cool that's exclusive to them. So, the Microsoft, they could have done something cool with the Kinect. If that had implemented into more games well, because, people don't like gesture and touch controls, they could have done something great. I think, the consoles need to, for the next generation, or for later in this generation, they need to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, we can't just release this console but with more power next time. What are we doing differently? And then someone slams the desk and says, I've got an idea. You hear that slamming the desk? I've got an idea. How about we make the screen on the console? And someone will be like, no, Steve, that's silly, and we'll kick him out of the office. But eventually, there'll be ideas, and because the PS4 to me is such a bland console. It's just it is just a reasonably powered gaming PC, and that's fine, I guess, right now. But it becomes uncompetitive as time goes on, and eventually, the console market loses PC that way. So yeah, console versus PC. I'd like it if consoles could stand up, because although as nice as you might argue if everyone playing PC gaming would be, I think there's a lot of benefits to consoles, and I don't want to see them die just yet. Don't die on me, consoles. So, yeah, let's move on to that story, to the last one here, which is to do with Chipgate. So, Chipgate is something you've probably heard about if you follow technology, but if you haven't heard about it, basically, Apple released the iPhone 6 and 6S recently, and because they released so many of them, they're the most sold phones as of right now, if I know my facts correctly. Basically, a very, very well sold phone with millions of copies sold before they even came out. Basically, they need to have lots of chips for those phones. So if the chips I'm talking about are the CPUs, and basically what they've done before, when one person can't deliver all the parts they need, is they'll split it between two manufacturers. So before, when they needed RAM, they'll split the RAM order between these people, and they just make sure the RAM runs the same specification. And this means that even though there are different models of iPhone 4S, for instance, out there, even though there are some models of this RAM, some models of that RAM, the difference is pretty much negligible. One type of RAM might last for 0.001 days longer, but the reality is they're going to be, vaguely the same product, and it's not going to be possible to tell, is the key part here. Whereas the thing about hashtag Chipgate, as it is called, is there are two versions of the iPhone 6S and 6S Plus, and there is a noticeable 20% difference in theory. That's what the Chipgate thing's all about, and this comes from the fact that to make the 30 million phones, that Apple actually for the first time had to make their CPU split between two manufacturers, between Samsung and between TSMC. So a lot of people say, why are they buying chips from Samsung? They'll be sabotaged, of course. That's not actually how things work. Samsung is a lot of different companies in one, and they don't really, the companies don't get along to boycott people just for the sake of doing it, because Apple could just buy the chips from someone else, but, Samsung makes a good offer, Samsung makes money, Apple makes money, and then the other Samsung still makes money. So that's the reason they do that. It's not a sabotage thing, because a lot of people get weirded out when they hear that Samsung actually makes the key part of the Apple phones. But yeah, basically the A9 chip is made from two separate people this time around. It's made from Samsung, and it's made from TSMC. And this is not too relevant to discover that they actually made two very different versions of the same chip. The Samsung version is using a lower manufacturing node, so you actually end up with a smaller chip from Samsung and a bigger chip from TSMC. And contrary to how you might figure this actually works, basically the bigger chip, the TSMC chip, actually ends up having a better battery life than the Samsung one. So, this is kind of terrible by itself. There are second-class, iPhones out there, but it's even worse when you realize there is no way to know the difference between these two versions of the phone. Some batches will just be Samsung batches, and some batches will be TSMC batches. The only way you can actually tell is to download an app on your phone, which tells you all the details of the innards, and one part has like an M in there that it shouldn't, for the CPU net, and that's how you can work out that you have the better CPU, or that you have the worst one. And at first this came out, and there was a 20% battery life according to the test, and that sounds terrible. Imagine buying your fancy new iPhone 6, which costs you Jeez knows how much these days. And you get home, you're like, oh, this is the Samsung model. Oh, I guess I lose 20% battery life. Yay! But yeah, I think, the reality behind this actually is that 20% test was an outlier chip. So they used, a really strong TSMC chip. They used a really weak Samsung chip. And then they stress tested it in a way which no user actually would. If you want to know what I mean by that, basically, to do a fair test of the phones, they ran both the phone CPU at 100% non-stop. And, when you're using a phone, you never use 100% of the CPU, right? Like 95% of the day, your CPU usage sits at I think it sits at 0 when it's off. Like, your phone is just not doing anything. And when you are using it, you'll never use anywhere close to 100. So basically, this was a flawed test between two outlier chips. The actual result is, some people, I believe I've seen some numbers on how it's actually done. The average is somewhere from 1 to 2%. And even that is during pretty heavy use. So if it ended up that you end up with a Samsung version of the iPhone 6, you're actually not really doing too badly. You're 1, maybe 2% down, but you still got you still get yourself an iPhone, and it still has basically the same battery life. And really, the only thing that I think is at fault here, because I'd love to say, yeah, Apple, they did bad, they did a lazy job and ended up making this really bad iPhone problem. But the actual reality behind it is when you need to get 30 million of something, there aren't many people in the world that can just be like, oh, that customized thing you need a very specific thing of, oh yeah, I'll have 30 million to you by next week. The reality is they needed to do this. I think the only problem I have is the fact that they asked for two separate models, and that they didn't then separate the models by okay, the one with slightly better battery life, let's put it on the iPhone 6s Plus. Or, or they could have just tested them and be like, oh, your battery life's 1% off, Samsung, fix that. Or oh, your battery life's 1% better, let's just have a better model here. I don't know, they could have done so many things to mitigate this, but they didn't. But the actual reality is, hashtag Chipgate, because every time, Apple gets a big thing, it's hashtag something gate. The reality is hashtag Chipgate is like a 1% difference, and even then, that's sometimes. So, the reality is people like to make hashtag gates about Apple. So far, there isn't really that many valid complaints about the iPhone, besides the fact that, you're paying 3 times the cost of the components compared to, like other manufacturers, and if you want an iPhone, it's still a valid option. Don't let this stop you. The reality is, if you want to not buy an iPhone for this reason or that reason that's valid, that's pretty cool. There's a lot of valid reasons. But if it ends with hashtag gate, so far it hasn't proven to be one. Hashtag bend where iPhone 6s Pluses were bending. The reality is you need to put a lot of force on that. And, it wasn't 99% of phones just bending slightly. It was a very, very subtle problem. So, so far there hasn't been a correct hashtag gate, but that doesn't mean that they keep coming out. And, as an Android enthusiast, it's like, oh, I guess Apple's done something again. And I like to get happy with that little bit where I'm like, aha, those darn Apple users and their less battery life. But the reality is, so far, it hasn't proven to be true. And that's that. So yeah, that's the end of the Toy Cat show for this week. I hope you did all enjoy it. If you did, please do let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll follow on from it on the next show. So far, we don't have a so far I've worked out the Toy Cat Show is probably going to stick as the name, because it's just a nice name, and it doesn't need to be in the title anyway. It's just, hey, welcome to the Toy Cat Show. I can introduce myself and say what the show is at the same time. Sounds great. Second of all, basically the branding of the monetization. So far, I think YouTube ads until whatever we can work out later. Whether it's sponsorships, whether it's doing this or that. I need to work out something, but I'd rather just have something that people want to listen to before we work out how we get that whole thing sorted, because that's the important part of the internet, just having something that people might want to watch/listen to, and I hope you do want to watch/listen to this. So if you want to help it out, I just very much appreciate a share of some form. If you're like, I hear you might like your technology/gaming news, go check this out. And that's a thing. The format is currently, it looks like it's a 20-minute podcast. I don't know, talking to yourself for too long, even though I do like just talking for nonstop, it can be tricky sometimes, so I think maybe we'll stick to that, but it'll just be as long as like 3 or 4 stories takes. And, maybe twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. I think just whenever there's news is the best format for a news podcast, but, we'll see exactly how that does go. Anyway, thank you all for listening, and I'll hear you all. Wait, that doesn't make any sense. I guess it makes just as much sense that I'll see you all, because technically I don't ever see you, but I'll hear you all in the next podcast. It sounds so ridiculous. So, have a nice day, and goodbye.